former federal prosecutor and senior writer for Political Magazine, Ankush Khardori, and Liz Oyer, a former Justice Department pardon attorney.
You could say this is all MAGA drama and it's happening over there and it's a sideshow, except for the fact that the MAGA drama is happening inside the Department of Justice, which means that it has implications for all Americans. What do you see as the stakes of what's going on right now?
You know, I think all of this is bad enough within its four corners, you know, either lying about this situation for years, covering it up. If that's what's going on, it remains unclear whether Trump's in these documents or not. But the thing that I've been talking about or thinking about today is the fact that this is an entirely self-inflicted wound, and the timing of this disclosure was entirely within their control. And the fact that they have been stumbling around, bungling around on this for days now, gives me some cause for concern about what happens when there's a real crisis. When there's a real unexpected crisis.
Like what would be a real crisis?
A terrorist attack, a cyber attack, any kind of very serious criminal act within this country that the FBI director might need to deal with or the attorney general might have to deal with.
Oh, like the assassination of two lawmakers, state lawmakers in Minnesota just a couple weeks ago?
I mean, communicating with the public effectively, clearly, and honestly is an extremely important part of what the attorney general and FBI director, in theory, should be doing. And what I think we've seen over the last week or so is that they may not be capable of doing that.
But here's the deal. You can't put this genie back in the bottle. I mean, they spent years on this. They groomed and prepared and spoon-fed their base with these conspiracies. You saw the animation of Bongino on his podcast and Kash Patel on the couch sitting up straight to talk about it. They believed it. They bought into it. So now somebody looked at something and said, you know what, we just going to put this right back over here in the corner. We're just not going to talk about this anymore. And the base is like, wait a minute, time out. You have to share it with because we know what's in it. I said in the last hour, a lot of these folks think that this is a list of Democrats. Well, Donald Trump was one of those Democrats at that time, palling around with Epstein. So what are we to make, very much to Ankush's point about, this being one thing, but then there's these other bigger things that could come along. We're getting a taste of how this administration deals with, if you can't handle the Epstein files, what the hell are you going to do if there is a terrorist attack? And how does this Justice Department deal with that?
This is a totally performative administration. All of Trump's cabinet members, and especially the attorney general, they are playing a part. They're performing to the base.
Doing their role.
Yeah. And she's probably his best performer to date until this incident. And the problem is that she can't fake her way through this. She is being asked for the factual support for promises that she made by the MAGA base, and she can't put her fingers on the facts. So that has created a crisis for these folks who really, as Ankush said, are not very substantive in their leadership. They are performing a part. But the problem is we're not on The Apprentice anymore. What might have worked in that context is not working right now to appease the MAGA base. And unfortunately, this is really the least important thing that is happening in the Department of Justice. Right now, it's the least important thing that they have to worry about in terms of priorities, and it is sucking up all of the air and all of the energy of these leaders who are supposed to be above the fray and considering the bigger picture of policy for our country.
You know, I'm with you. This is a self-inflicted wound and a boomerang that has come back around on this administration, on these very people. Knock them right upside the head, because this is something that they fed for years. And then when they got into the White House, I remember all of these influencers, these right-wing influencers were invited to the White House and they walked out with these binders saying, we've got pieces of the Epstein files. They zhuzhed it all up, only to now have a mess on our hands. But you made this point about what really could happen in this country, and you've got these folks who don't know what they're doing. I'm thinking about what Steve Bannon has been saying, Alicia, and about the special prosecutor.
Yes, he's been saying he was at Turning Points, and he was talking about his deciphering of what it is that Donald Trump has been saying about the use of a special prosecutor that theoretically would be assigned to Epstein, but Bannon sees more of a slippery slope. Take a listen.
You're going to have the nullification project and the Russian hoax after he won to try to kill his first term. You're then going to have the stealing of the 2020 election. And guess what? Let's throw in January 6th, right? January 6th.
Do you see how, like, the aperture is already expanding? And you layer on top of that what Mark Elias has warned us about, which is the fact that Donald Trump knows he now needs to reconsolidate his base. What does he do when he wants to reconsolidate his base? He turns his ire and his attention and his Justice Department to his political enemies.
And they can find a lawyer who would be willing to play that part.
Well, you know, the thing of it is, though, that is a little bit of an effort to, I think, to sidestep this issue and maybe even elongate the sort of Jeffrey Epstein sort of conspiracy, because there's actually no reason why they need a special counsel.
Correct.
Pam Bondi is supposed to be doing this job. Jeffrey Epstein is not a Democratic opposition to Donald Trump. He's dead, right? So they do not require a special counsel or anyone outside the department to get to the bottom of what's going on in the Epstein case and to report those facts out. That is her job. If she cannot do it, she should not be the Attorney General. They don't need another shadow Attorney General doing all the things that Steve Bannon wishes they would do.
Do you agree?
I do agree. This is such an odd case because I think one thing that isn't being talked about very much is this case was actually initiated during President Trump's first term in office. It was initiated in 2019. Epstein died in 2019. So the whole notion that we need further investigation into this case that Trump's own Justice Department originated is very bizarre. It's a complete distraction, and it's a distraction, frankly, from much more important things that are happening in the Department of Justice right now.
I mean, particularly when you look at the firing of federal employees across across the system, what we saw just last week at the State Department, we were talking about the impact that could have on our foreign policy. To both of your points about this being a distraction, but there are some interesting little pieces brought up by the likes of Laura Loomer. You know, in her Politico playbook headline, Trump's Epstein headache isn't going away. She notes, I don't see how there can be a situation where Bongino can coexist with Blondie, that's her derisive term or moniker for Pam Bondi, as Attorney General. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a resignation from Bongino. Ms. Loomer goes on to say,
how low that the playbook has gotten that they are now quoting Laura Loomer, but that's another.
You need copy, I guess. But the reality of it is that's eating away within the department, right? It's. I mean, Bongino, whether he's qualified or not in the position, he's in the position, and so now if he suddenly resigns, what does that do in this process? I mean, now the upside is it's not a Senate appointed position, so you don't have to go through that, right? But it is disruptive.
Well, this president has shown that he does not value substantive knowledge or experience in these very important roles. So I'm not sure that replacing Bongino would really be that big of a deal. I think that we should really be paying attention to what types of institutional safeguards remain in the Department of Justice now that we know that we have this easily distractible leadership. And one of the things that has not gotten the attention it deserves is that Pam Bondi on Friday fired the department's chief ethics official, which is an extremely alarming development, and it sort of flew under the radar as we're all freaking out about Jeffrey Epstein and paying attention to this issue. But that is the person who is entrusted with ensuring that the political leadership of the Department of Justice is complying with federal ethics laws. That's the person who might say, you can't accept that airplane, or you can't preside over a case where your brother is the attorney of record. And those types of things are just not important to this administration. Maintaining the institutional integrity and the ethics of the place are just falling by the wayside in favor of political circuses like the one that we've seen in the Epstein case. And this is going to do long-term damage to the credibility of the institution of the Department of Justice.
Well, isn't that the point, though, Ankush? That is what they're trying to do. I have to remind people that the folks that work in this White House, particularly the Stephen Millers, the president himself, Russell Vought, have said that their goal was to deconstruct the administrative state. The administrative state is the federal government. The president has referred to the Justice Department as his attorneys. And so what Liz is saying about the institutional safeguards, if you will, guardrails within the department, I feel like they are surgically being removed.
There has been an intentional element to this. I mean, that was a deliberate choice to remove the ethics official. Another story that was sort of under the radar, Reuters reported today that 2/3 of the lawyers who defend the government in civil litigation have left the department. 2/3. We're talking about decades and decades and decades of experience here. And I mean, I've heard stories like that, people leaving because they're fed up. They don't want to be in court and in a position where they're potentially having to say an inaccurate thing to a judge. I'm sure you've heard variations on these too. So there has been a deliberate effort in certain areas of the department to winnow things down, indifference in some instances, but also redirect resources away from really important crime-fighting efforts, things like fraud, financial fraud, white-collar crime, toward, frankly, things like Jeff Epstein, which has consumed the department's most senior leadership, as Liz was saying, for the last week.